Welcome to a Cannaconvo episode of Cannabis Last Week, brought to you by Global Cannabis Times. I'm your host, John Piro. Now, before we get to an awesome interview and conversation, I want to note that any opinions I express are my own and not those of my law firm, Zuber Lawler, because when I'm not fighting crime by night as a mess vigilante, I practice cannabis and RP law. So my views, not my law firm. And Beth, before we start, I always like to do a quick prayer to the video chat gods, which we definitely need. You see from our prep time, right? May our Wi-Fi connections be sturdy. All dogs and children, and my kids are home today, off from school, remain quiet. And may Amazon prime another time. Amen. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Beth Kotarba. She is COO of Native Roots. And I need to say, Beth, up front, Native Roots is the first dispensary I ever went to, and it really set the bar high. I didn't realize
that
it
is
at the
awesome
time.
to hear, John. I love hearing that.
So personally, it means a lot to have you on. I'm very happy to have you here. So I think just to start, I think it'd be really helpful if you could tell us just briefly about Native Roots and your role there.
Sure, I would love to. Native Roots is a vertically integrated cannabis company in Colorado. We are one of the largest privately owned cannabis companies in Colorado. We have 20 stores across the state. And we, as being vertically integrated, we produce, grow, and cultivate cannabis. And we have a processing facility as well. And we also have 3 stores in Canada, although they are branded under they have a different branding than Native Roots there, 3 retail stores.
Oh, interesting. And so in Canada, is it vertical too, or just the retail stores?
Just retail in Canada, strictly retail stores. It's called garden variety there. So
always good
here,
puns.
like I said, we have 20 stores. We're just in Colorado.
Got it. And so, you're COO there. How long have you been with the company?
I've been here about 5.5 years. So seen a lot of growth, a lot of change, and a lot of just advancement in the stuff we're doing here. So it's been really exciting.
Got it. So vertically integrated, is obviously an interesting concept that plays out different in different states. Colorado, pioneer, right? Very, mature market. So, as a vertically integrated operation, I think that one of the questions that becomes interesting is balance, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, over the course of, Native Roots, how do you plan for that right mix of balance in terms of, supplying your own stores versus maximizing value by wholesaling but also how many products you bring in from other brands? Just curious to know how you guys approach balance as an organization and, you personally in terms of your guidance there.
Yeah, it has been a big challenge for us because, as when you're vertically integrated, you have to wear a lot of hats. You can't focus on any one thing. You have to be a product manufacturer. You have to be a retailer. And, in our case, we also wholesale our brands. So, I have to share marketing with retail for products and for the store brand. So it does get really complicated. And we've had our struggles with balancing, particularly on the production side. You mentioned it, who gets the product. And when we are, have a high demand, who gets to have what? And so it really for us starts with forecasting. And about probably a year and a half ago, we engaged on a project where we really focused in on our planning, sales and operational planning, where we were bringing retail and production and finance together so that we could really think about, okay, what do we need? It all starts with sales and demand and what we're expecting to do. And with that, then we can better plan our production because, in the wholesale world, in sales in general, people want it and they want it now. On the production side, I need time, and plants take a long time to grow. And, things just take time. So what we found is really been changing things for us and helping us is starting at that front with really solid forecasting of what we think we're going to do by product line. And then we translate that into, well, how much raw material does that equate? Can I grow that? And this process has helped us have better cross-departmental discussions around that so that we can understand each other, set expectations right, and not really be operating in our silos, which we did a lot to start.
So I think that's also interesting. I'm assuming also that you learn as you go, in terms of, right, you have more and more data to build from in terms of buying patterns. Like one thing I found interesting, right, is I like looking at the data as a geek, like Headset, when it releases reports of what are the biggest sales days, and you get more familiar. And I take personal pride that in their top 5 sales days nationally or whenever they looked at least one night of Hanukkah was on the top 5 the 2 years that they analyzed. So I guess there's also a function of you learn as you go, you get smarter from your own data and what you could see from it, and then implementing that in forecasting, as you said.
Absolutely. And, when we embarked on this little journey of putting this into place, we brought in some experienced folks to help us with tools and mentoring our team on some things that we maybe didn't have experience with. And that is so exactly right on. And what we found is, we've made a lot of use of a statistical forecast and using some statistics and things to do just what you're saying, looking at our product set. But it takes time to build. It takes time for you to build that data set for it to be something that we can predictably count on, or to know, what we can expect to happen. So we're building that. We are definitely learning as we go and adjusting. And those forecasts aren't always perfect. The market's doing its own thing now too. So you have to kind of take that into effect. And our systems are a little immature too, quite frankly, being a new industry. We do a lot of things on spreadsheets, and we are just now getting into using more robust tools. We do use the data that's out there. And we actually have a really great BI team here who synthesizes that. And we use Tableau, which gives us great reporting. But it takes time to build consistent data over time to really start making decisions on that. So every month we have better data, and we're seeing that we're getting better at forecasting.
Got it. I just out of curiosity, you don't need to, name names. Do you, as you've built this out, is it like your own software that you're building? Are there parties in the industry that you work with? I mean, I'm obviously separate and apart from what you're required from regulators, but from learning from the data, was it build it yourself because you guys were in this so early? I'm just kind of curious, actually, in that regard.
Right. Yeah. We started with, honestly, spreadsheets and models and things built in that. And we were running manufacturing on that. And within the last couple of years, we have been implementing an ERP, a mainstream ERP system that allows us to capture the data in a more formal way, in a more classical way, if you will, for manufacturing and other things and sales. And then we obviously have a point of sale system that's used in the industry. It's pretty well known. So we haven't built any of those ourselves. We're using what's out there and working to integrate them, which is a big project, but we're going with more of the, mainstream applications.
Got it. And so along these lines, and you alluded to this a little bit in terms of how the market develops. One thing that I found, interesting in covering all the news on the podcast is, trends in different states and, overall sales. So one thing that certainly, caught my attention, with your focus being so established vertically in Colorado, is there is this trend now of multiple months of like declining sales by comparison to prior years in Colorado. And, I looked at some of the articles and I think it's as more states come online, cannabis tourism is affected. And as the market matures, so I'm curious to know in general, how that affects forecasting and your thoughts overall on that as a trend for Colorado and other states, as being on the front lines. Some of your thoughts I'd be very curious about.
Yeah, we are most definitely seeing that. And it's a unique place to be because, over all of the years that, Native Roots has been going back to when medical marijuana was legalized 10 years, we've always seen growth, always, every year, very healthy growth. And I think, and then during the COVID and the pandemic, it actually went up. Like our growth actually went up. I think people had a lot of time to be home and to make use of the product. And, you mentioned a lot of the reasons why I think things are stabilizing a bit. Our economy probably is a big part of it as well. And things are opened up, people are spending dollars on a lot of other things now. So it's a unique place for us to be where we're seeing more, it's leveling off and or going down. We've been really fortunate. Our market share is staying pretty good, particularly in the medical market, which is really, declining faster. But where it's really been interesting and the challenges in the forecasting, like you mentioned, is it's new. So there's not a lot of trends to go on. And also from a production perspective, when we look at that, we are used to growing. I mean, the mindset from when I started was you grow as much plant and produce as much, flower product to be used as you possibly can. And for the first time, we're looking at where we have possibly more than we need, and having to figure out how to plan to maybe produce less. And when you're growing flower, that's a very, very long timeline, as you can imagine, because it just takes so long to get from seed to where it's going to. So that has been a challenge particularly on my supply side of, the forecast is moving and changing, and I'm having to adjust in a direction I've never really had to adjust before to say, wow, should we be growing this much? Or, how do we best use what we have? In the past, it's always been a little bit fighting for those resources, and now it's changed, if that makes sense.
So I'm the lawyer who likes to put on the entrepreneurial cap, right? So I'm curious, we're talking earlier, right, about the balance of wholesaling versus products for your own stores. So I'm just like shooting off the top of my head here. So say the demand goes down, right? And you, as you said, you always want to grow. You don't want to not have. So is it like some type of function of, all right, so this is enough for our store now because there's a little shift down. The rest goes to wholesale. Maybe we cut the price a little bit, right? We get it out of the door, but it's like that kind of strategy as these things develop and as you kind of learn from how the market's maturing, like that kind of idea.
Yeah. And, the other thing we didn't really talk about is the market in general, because it's very mature. There's a lot of product in the market, and prices for wholesale. We've always seen certain times of year, there's more product in the market, say in the fall, when they harvest outdoor, a lot of product comes on the market, the price per pound goes down. What we're seeing now is that price per pound hasn't really gone back up a lot. So, the pricing is much lower on wholesale right now. And so then we have to balance, and that's part of this process of having finance involved, where we do have to look at, okay, where is it most profitable to send our product to? Because, we can move it on the wholesale market, but is it profitable to do so? And when the price per pound goes down, that's just another added challenge in there to, remain profitable. And you want to make money on what you're growing. And at what point do you say, well, we're not making money on this. We shouldn't do it.
Got it. And so, yeah, I think that's very interesting. I also think of as a trend that I see sometimes is once the market in a state, the prices go down, it's hard to get them back up to a certain extent, right? You think of economics class and everything, but it seems like that sometimes, I see happening in general. So that's an interesting point. So now you talked a little bit also, in general, but you mentioned finance right now. So how important is it in dealing with all these items to bring together the different components of the company? As the larger you get, it could be one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and that results, in suboptimal, things developing. So what strategies do you use as a company internally to kind of establish a partnership between the different components of the company, like sales, production, finance?
Yeah. So we have defined a process that's a repeatable process that we go through every month. The key players are demand, which is our sales organization, retail and wholesale, supply, which is my production organization, and then finance is what we call the third leg of the stool there, that really they bring it all together. And so we have a cadence of really meetings that we're not quite there yet, but it just becomes the fabric of what you're doing. So it starts with the consensus forecast, where sales says, if I had all the product in the world, this is the revenue I think I can do. that flips over. My team, we run inventory reporting, we run production reporting, and we look at that and we say, can we meet that? What they're asking for, can we do that? And then the third piece, and we all kind of are doing this separately, but we have our cadence throughout the month of when we get the data and when we can look at it. And then finance takes that forecast and translates that into, well, how does this compare to our budget and what we're expecting to do from a financial perspective in the company? How does this impact our contribution margin on these products? Are we, if we have to make some tough choices about where the flower goes, what's our best place to, should we be making shatter and wax, or should we be sending this to the wholesale market as flower? It's just an example of the types of questions. We meet once a month. We call it our pre-SNOP meeting, where all the three groups come together. We agree on the plan for the next 3 months. And, if there's any high level issues that need to be worked out, let's say, well, hey, we're not going to meet our budget for this month. How are we going to adjust? And finance will say, hey, dig in production. And I'll say, well, I'm kind of giving hypotheticals, but it could be, well, hey, to meet that, I need to hire some more people, or I need some equipment, or, whatever the case may be. But we've really gotten into this flow monthly where we do that. And then we bring it to the executive team and we look at it and everyone says, okay, that's a plan. And then we can all lock in, because what had been happening, you talked about the silos, and it's really easy to get in that place. And we were there for a really long time. And then what happened is, a little bit of whiplash on the production side, because all of a sudden, hey, we want to run we want to run a promotion, or we want to do this. And we just couldn't react fast enough, which was, frustrating for everybody and frustrating for us. And so now we kind of are agreeing, right now we're locking in 2 to 3 months ahead so that we can plan better and everybody can know what to expect. So I think that's been the biggest. We always kind of say, we're telling each other the truth, we're setting expectations, and we're all working to meet our piece of that. And without those 3 pieces, it's really difficult to do that without just kind of reacting, always reacting.
So actually, this raises an interesting question, right? Because you're literally bringing people together, the different parts of the company. And pre-pandemic, obviously the way that it's set up is departments sit together, right? Production's in a production facility, right? And the other teams sit together. Just out of curiosity, off the top of my head, with where you are in the pandemic, I don't know where you are in terms of a virtual work policy versus in office or whatever. How has that affected things? How do you have it now? Do you think it will continue that way? Because there is, there's been this tectonic shift because of the pandemic. And I think that we're at this interesting point right now in terms of what becomes a permanent aspect, because there are people's expectations now, employees' expectations in terms of virtual work or not. So I'm just, kind of curious where you guys are, where you guys think it's going. You don't have to set policy for the company now. If you want to, to plead the fifth, that's also fine as a leader. But just curious to know how it's developing there.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because we have kind of different folks that have been impacted by it differently. So, the production staff, we couldn't really work remotely. You have to be there in the building every day. Retail, the same thing. So those 2 organizations did not have really work from home options. There's certain roles in there that did. And our more of our, what I'll call our corporate staff, they could take advantage of that more, which we did. During the periods of time, we were really careful. And even on the production side, we did our best to minimize the number of people in the facility just for the safety of the people that were there, so that we could spread them out. We could shift people so that, there was space in the locker rooms. We had a very detailed schedule for people to make sure we weren't having overlap, that people felt like they had space. And it was really challenging to do that, but we were able to do it. Retail, of course, had all kinds of guidelines from the Department of Health and such. They were interacting with customers, which was even more complex for them to try to keep people safe and interact in a way that was following the rules. So I think we all went through a period of just upheaval of how we operated. We are now back, I would say, just only in the last few months, we've eased guidelines around masking, and people have come back, particularly in the production space. Everybody is back in the office now on a regular basis, even people that could kind of work somewhere else. And our corporate office is, you're right, you can't go back. Once you start to work from home, it's really difficult to go back, but doing a much more modified, where teams meet a couple, like my supply chain team, they have certain days they're in so they can be together, because you do work. I don't know. I personally think there's a lot of value to being together culturally and, talking to people. So as we talk about this process, it was all virtual for a long time. And we have just recently started having those so we're all sitting in a room talking about it. So we're coming together, and, some of the restrictions we've eased, but we were really lucky. We have an amazing environmental and safety manager, and she just guided us through the pandemic beautifully, along with our HR team. So things are feeling much more normal.
Got it. And I agree. There's nothing like being in person, for some of these things and some of these interactions. I think that the hybrid model seems to be where a lot of places, if possible, not restricted, because it's hard to grow a plant without being there, or to sell product without being there. And by the way, I'm still in shock and pleasantly surprised. You referred to how sales did well during the pandemic, that cannabis was considered an essential business, right? Look how far we've come. And so, one thing you referred to the C-suite, you just referred to another employee. It was also a woman. An interesting topic that comes up in the industry and the news that I see is, unfortunately, the lack of diversity and the lack of, women in leadership positions in the industry. I think the stats I saw were like 8% women in C-suite positions in the industry. I think I covered that a couple of months ago on the podcast. Now, from what I understand, Native Roots is different. That, women make up a significant number of the key, leadership C-suite, and in general are well represented on production team too, which I think is less commonplace, not to, lean into preconceived notions or anything. So how did that happen? How did you make that happen? Did it evolve? Curious to know how you developed that, because it's important in the industry. And as I always like to say, if I was Thanos snapping my finger, I would change the leadership of every company and every government to women immediately. White guys have had their shot. How did you make that happen? How could we learn from that in the industry at other companies?
Yeah, sure. I love talking about this because I'm so proud of Native Roots. And when I look around, I'm always like, oh, this is great. Because like you said, half of the executive team are women in very important, positions. The chief sales officer is a female. I'm running production, legal, HR, accounting for a while was a woman. And I would always like to point out to my male counterparts when we would be on those Zoom meetings during the pandemic, I'm like, oh, look at that. This is really great. So, myself personally, I think that helps set the tone for the company when people can see that women are leading these really important, functions within the organization. And I truly believe it changes the culture a bit. So when you have that and you have, people looking for it, I will speak for myself, but I know my colleagues do the same. I look for and celebrate those opportunities for women to excel. And I point it out and make sure that they feel supported. When I started, I started off just in operations over cultivation. And then in a year, I took over this COO position where I had more departments. But when I started, I had one female manager working in the area. There were women, but it's in production, particularly on the cultivation side, it's a very physical job. There were like lots of men, young men. And it was a culture of, the cannabis culture is fun and it's very informal and all of these things. So when I started, there was one female manager, and I just kept trying to keep my eye out for those folks that seemed to be excelling, watching how we were hiring women, encouraging the male managers that I had to give these women a fair shot and a good look. So when we would have the positions coming open, I would get kind of excited when a woman would apply for them. And, the first big milestone, I think, in the cultivation space is our first female bay manager. That's a pretty important role in our organization, very well respected and looked up to. And these women that are in these roles, they deserve them on the surface. But I do think you have to sometimes, as you're filling those roles, kind of say, okay, all things equal here, let's give this a shot. And they've done amazing. And then that sets the tone for the next one. And so now we have 2 women bay managers. And in fact, one of them was just promoted to head grower at our other facility. And I celebrate that. I never mean to have that be detrimental to any of the men that get those roles. It's equally important, but I make it a big deal in my organization to celebrate those women and call out, hey, look, this is a great accomplishment, and I'm proud of you. And we've hired women. In my organization, when I look at it, women are leading key departments. Our whole supply chain director is a woman, and our processing facility, the leader in that space, is a woman. That's a relatively new change in the last year. And our environmental health and safety is a woman. And, I have a project manager that is really key to what we do. So you get these strong, smart women in these roles. And I think it snowballs. I really do. I think it really starts to make other women see they can do it. And we encourage one another. And so I'm really excited about it. We have a good mix. And I think it changes the culture too. I think it's changed our culture in a positive way. Not that it was ever bad, but that it's good.
Got it. Look, as a proud girl dad, I fully believe, girls rule and boys rule. So, it's something to be proud of. So, I mean, to kind of recap the idea here, because I think that this is important, and, hopefully an important takeaway that people watching running companies is, as you said, when leadership positions come open in different compartments, right, to have someone like you at the tip top, right, get involved and not necessarily just let some default decision, made by another party that might just, guys hiring guys, right, get involved, get women in leadership roles, right, they can succeed, it could pay off in the environment. And as you said, then women interviewing for other jobs, perhaps, lower level ones, they come in and see who's interviewing them, right? I'm sure it's an aspect of the company that you proudly, show to candidates and everything like that. And so as you said, right, you can get in, maybe put your finger on the scale slightly and then encourage it. And then it could expand. And as you said, you think it's paid off positively in terms of how the company's developed in its approach, right? So I think I can't wait till we post this interview. I put that up on LinkedIn as one of the takeaways. That's just, really, really fantastic and exciting stuff. So just some other interesting topics for me, right? In terms of, ideas, right? From the fact that Colorado is a mature market. This is something I'm always curious about in terms of trends with product diversification. In panels that I did on Benzinga, when we're talking about the connoisseurs that are typically flower buyers that know their strains versus, the canna curious, right? The people who don't like to smoke necessarily, like lower dose products. What could we learn from Colorado in terms of how this is developed? I remember seeing Colorado stats about the core connoisseurs and the disproportionate, part of the market. But I'm curious on your end, what trends do you see? What could the markets coming online, like those near, dear, literally and figuratively, New York and New Jersey, learn from how mature markets have developed?
Yeah, one thing that as it develops, your consumer definitely gets more discerning and more critical of the product. I think, when it first becomes legal and everyone's like, oh gosh, I can go in and do this legally and buy it, there probably wasn't the scrutiny on the quality of the product or the variety of the product that you have available. And so I have even noticed that in the time that I am here, how much more important it has become to really think about your variety that you're offering and the quality of the product that you're offering, because they won't just buy anything. And in the last year, for us specifically related to our flower, which by the way, flower seems to be a constant of, one of your best selling. It's just, that is a big, big part of the market. People want to consume that, want to buy that. So that's an important one. And, back to our planning, one of the other key things that we've done in this initiative is really look at our variety and what is the right amount to have. People want variety, but when you are always having different things, it's really hard to get your pulse on, well, what do they really like? Do they like this strain, or are they not buying it because we didn't have it? So that's kind of a different conversation. But I think that as you mature, you really do have to think about what you're planting as far as, for flower, and also then the mix in the store for those other buyers. And it seems like, gummies are a staple for whatever reason. And again, as that market matures and you get your market leaders, it can be really tough to break into that. So for us as a vertically integrated, we've looked really hard at, wow, some of these markets are really established. Should we be trying to do that? Even though we could probably produce and provide to our stores at a better cost, consumers now know what their favorites are. They really, really do. And so some of those markets are really hard to break into. And just because the other thing that, and this is a little bit of my own personal opinion, but what I've seen, because we've had to think about product development, you get all these great ideas. And just because something has cannabis in it doesn't mean someone's going to buy it. It might sound fun, you know what I mean? But you have to really, like I say, the consumer is getting really picky about what they like, and they're knowing what brands they like, and they like to come in and get and know what they're getting is consistent. So the competition gets harder. The consumer becomes harder to please. And so you just have to keep up in your game, is kind of what I see in the market, to keep it. And just because you make it doesn't mean someone's going to buy it.
I think that that's really, really interesting because, well, look, I'm an IP geek, trademark geek, right? And there's such a focus on brands in the industry because of the idiosyncrasies, that federal legality, and how you have to hop from state to state through licensing agreements, finding the right partners. It's just so much more complex. And it's so funny that you talk about quality, because at the past couple conferences and moderating, I can't tell you how much I hear people talking about crappy weed and the concerns of like going from one state to another, right? You are in a situation, you are completely in control, and you're talking about brands in a different way. You are a mature market, and you are saying that at this point, brand loyalty in Colorado is entrenched. You have chosen not to enter certain product sectors because you don't know if you can make a dent, because people are so loyal. And so I think that that's another way to emphasize the importance of brands, really, that over the course of what's still a young industry, right? You're the tip of the spear, but it's still obviously a young industry in different sectors. People like their brands and they are used to them. And the consistency obviously is something that we, is such another focus on the industry, because people have different reactions, based on their physiology. Sativa versus indica, one of my stories of the year, it is complete BS. I learned the history recently on a post, and yet it's a shorthand we need, right? Like there's,
short of anything else. Yeah. I know our growers, it makes them crazy because they're like, this really doesn't mean much, but it does to the consumer. And we've learned that too. It's been interesting for me, learning so much about cannabis and working with these growers that are so smart, and how they will be like, but this is really good. We should be putting this on our shelves. And the flip side being, yeah, but our bud tenders can't sell it. Like, what the customer wants is what the customer wants. And our customer isn't always, the expert on it, like the folks that are growing it. It's interesting, but I'm with you 100%. We need to move past those designations because they're not super meaningful.
So final question, wrapping up. So you guys kick butt in your one state. You are vertical. You are learning as you go. right? You have admirable, makeup in terms of your demographics. You have connected the different parts of the company to create more efficiency. What are the future goals? What are the goals for the next couple of years? Is it that you continue getting better at what you do in your state? Do you have eyes on, different territories? I'm curious, right? With everything that you've learned, where do you, see the company and where do you want it to be in a couple of years?
Yeah, I think we want to continue to grow. We have, when states were opening up, we made some pretty concerted efforts to get into those states through the licensing process, which is really quite difficult and quite expensive. The requirements to get new licenses can be really, really tough, and market to market, it's so different. So we continue to keep our eye on that for the right opportunity. But we've really been focused internally on our own market and growing and advancing what we're doing here in Colorado. We've done some consolidation of our brands to make them more meaningful in the state. I think, potentially some opportunities for us to take our brand to other states, I think is out there and interesting to us because we've invested in that. And that's where you can start to, spread your marketing costs and some of that. There's definitely other challenges with that because every state you've got to find, partners that you trust. But I think that's something that we're starting to look at. And we're always looking for licenses to buy and build in Colorado so that we can become bigger in Colorado. And there's a lot of consolidation going on. Like I say, we're the largest privately held. We're one of the few that haven't been bought, up by one of the MSOs. And I think, you always look for opportunities there to grow as well. But we've been really internally focused to just, be profitable and to run a good business so that when those scaling opportunities come up, we're ready to roll and we can take our operation and get it running somewhere else or go into another, buy an existing and know what to do to get it running profitably. So I've been really thankful that while some of the out-of-state opportunities didn't come through, we've been investing in improving, be it technology or process or whatever it is to really shore up what we're doing and make it top notch so we can take it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's great. Beth, I can't thank you enough. I think we're going to wrap up here to respect your busy schedule, but it was fantastic chatting with you. I really appreciate it. So everyone, Beth Kotarba from Native Roots, thanks again. And that is all she wrote.